In today's show, we discuss who really built the pyramids.
And now, the TNT Talk Show, daring to go where other podcasts fear to tread.
Hello, I'm Tony Fasulo, and I share the stage with my esteemed friend and colleague, Tayo Boya. Tayo, hello, my friend. I hope you're keeping safe and well.
Yeah, what the hell, Tony? What you gonna do, eh?
With your wonderful disposition and positivity, are you going to say hi to our audience?
Yeah, what the hell?
Oh, you're bucking the trend here. What's going on?
I want us to get past this stage. Listen. How do you kill a blue elephant?
I don't even know whether to even engage in this. I didn't even know there was a blue elephant, but I'll ask the question anyway. I don't know. How do you kill a blue elephant?
You shoot it with a blue elephant gun, obviously. All right. Okay. How do you kill a pink elephant?
I don't know whether to rise up to this. Going with your analogy earlier, is it a pink gun?
No, there's no such thing as a pink elephant gun, Tony. Come on. Come on.
Please, can I stress, don't give up the day job.
Let me tell you how to kill a pink elephant. Choke it until it turns blue, and then shoot it with the blue elephant gun, Tony. Come on, it's common sense.
Why am I laughing? This is so bad.
Yeah, I love it when you laugh.
These are like cracker jokes that you get out of a cracker that are so bad you laugh anyway because they're so painful, and you're bringing them to our show, Tyler.
I love it when I hear you laugh like that because I know it pains you. Just the way you pain me, making me say hello to the audience. I get my revenge. If our audience may not know what that means, that's revenge. From what show was that? I will have my revenge. It was a Black Adder, one of the Black Adders, one of the series. Yes, so when he was captured, Lord Blackadder was captured and held prisoner in Portugal, I believe it was.
I can't remember. It's been so long since I saw those, but anyway. Yeah. Right, let's move on with the show. And our topic today is who really built the pyramids. Now, I don't know whether you want to give your opinion on this first, or shall I? Whatever you prefer, Dio.
This topic came about when I happened upon a book, which we've discussed before. This is a book that the CIA has seen fit to proscribe. It was written in 1963, was published in 1965, and the CIA just took all the copies and disappeared with them. And it's a book about ancient civilizations. And as we've already spoken about it, we were quite perplexed because neither one of us could figure out why the CIA would be bothered about a book which dealt with ancient civilizations, and we still don't know how.
But it's still classified today. That book.
It's still classified till today, audience. If believe it or not, the book is still classified till today. But some parts were released, and one of the parts that was released dealt with ancient Egypt. And there are suggestions that the Egyptians did not build the pyramid or the Sphinx. I think in particular, the Sphinx was the main focus in the book. That it wasn't built by the Egyptians. And then I came across a video, which was related to the book. By the way, it was through this video that I learned about the book. And the video maker showed video of various stones that make up the pyramids and the temples. And I have to say that the join between the stones was so incredibly fine that it shocked me. I mean, I want the audience to understand that I think we would have difficulty creating such fine joints today with all our technology, lasers and all.
Agreed.
And that is when I started taking this book's assertion more seriously, because I cannot fathom who would have been able to create those joints and to mason, and I don't think mason is actually a verb, and to mason those stones so accurately. And that's why I said, look, let's have a chat about who might have built the pyramids, because it really doesn't seem to be the ancient Egyptians.
No, I'm in agreement with you actually, because I think we're going to unravel a few bits of evidence as we go through this episode today, because I'm in agreement with you. I think it does a lot of the standard the standard narrative is that they were built by slaves. There were a lot of them, and that's it. But when you look at the detail of what these things, how these things are made, the precision of them, as you've just alluded to, you start to think, well, how on earth, with the tools that we've uncovered, that seems to be attributed to the Egyptians, how can they make such precision cuts to granite and limestone and even obsidian, which is some of the others, which I'll touch on in a moment, with such accuracy without cracking, splitting, affecting it in such a way that, as you've rightly said, these stones are not insignificant. They're huge. And to get them to line up, get them to line up so perfectly that you can't even get a hair or a piece of paper in between the cracks because they're so well put together, beggars belief. So
that is the thing, you see, Tony. I think you and I, and maybe our audience, they've already heard this before, that you can't put a hair in between these stones. And I'm sure until you see the sorts of video or pictures or images that I'm talking about, it's just a phrase that is virtually meaningless. You can't put a hair between them. When you see what we're talking about, and then you realize that you really can't put a hair between these two stones, then I invite you to go outside into your garden and pick up two stones and try to put them together in such a way that a hair won't pass between the stones. And then you begin to appreciate the difficulty. And Tony said just now, he said these are large stones. Yeah, well, that's one way to describe them. Humongously massive is another way, because you're talking about stones that are usually a minimum of 25 tons and go up to 50 tons. So in the 21st century, these are stones that would give us some form of headache to manipulate. I mean, I'm sure we could do it because with our technologies and whatnot, but it's not going to be easy, and possibly not even every country on earth could manage it in the 21st century.
Absolutely.
So it's not an inconsiderable. It's not a trivial job here we're talking about.
No.
And I just wanted to emphasize, because when you said you can't fit a hair between the seams, I want people to understand that that's literal.
Yes.
It's not a figure of speech.
It is absolutely correct. I mean, I was gobsmacked. I think you actually mentioned it to me one time, and I thought it can't be that tight. But I've subsequently done some more research, and you're absolutely spot on, Tyre. It is exactly that. You literally cannot get a paper, and someone even went up to them with a piece of paper and tried to put them between the gaps of these huge stones, as you say. They're enormous. You cannot get a paper through the gap. They are so well made and put together that the craftsmanship is incredible. And the question that we're raising in this whole whole talk today, this whole show, is how were these pyramids actually built? Who really built them? Because if you go back to the Egyptian bits that they've found and discovered, there's a lot of evidence to show that they only had very rudimentary tools. So how could you use these simple tools to cut these really solid rocks in the way that they have? And they're brilliantly cut, by the way, and line them all up. Logistically, it as you say, even today, we are still scratching our heads as to how the pyramids were made, because there's so much debate about it. It's not it's not a conclusion and done, because the Egyptians didn't even have the wheel. This is what sounds crazy. And I've got some figures here which I researched for one of the pyramids. The smallest blocks were 2.5 tons each, smallest ones. The average ones were between 15 and 20 tons each, and the bigger ones were 50 tons each, 50 to 70 tons each.
Right.
And they used 2.3 million 2.3 million of these to construct the pyramids. 2.3 million. I mean,
I should correct myself. So when I said starting from 25 tons to 50 tons, and these are the foundation, these are the big blocks, the foundation blocks,
the foundation
not
blocks.
Every single stone, because obviously some of them were smaller. So thanks for the correction. Yeah.
But the 2.5 tons are still sizable, They're still sizable.
It's not a wheelbarrow job, is it? It's not a wheelbarrow job for a single workman. Would you just hop down there? No. Whatever they were called, I don't know ancient Egyptian names, unfortunately. So I can't say.
I mean, some of the things that really, if our listeners want to do some research, there's plenty of information about this on the internet. But the Giza pyramid, the big one, that actually points to true north. So not only did they construct this thing so brilliantly, it's only 3/60ths of a degree off of true north. So not only did they construct it the way they did, they also knew about the stars and the geometry of the planet in order to have this pointing to true north. Even the Greenwich Observatory in London is less accurate than the Giza pyramid. Did you know that?
Well, no.
That's incredible. I only found that out today. The Greenwich Observatory in London is 9/60th of a degree less accurate than the Giza pyramid.
When you say it points to true north, what does that exactly mean? I'm imagining the pyramid. Did you say true north, by the way?
True north, not magnetic north. True north.
Okay. What does that mean that it points to it? Because it's a pyramid. So what's pointing? It's obviously not the apex. It's not the point at the top, is it?
It's the alignment of the pyramid itself. The flat face where the entrance is designed so that north is directly in front. If you threw a line straight out, and it would go directly to true north, and it was designed that way.
The flat face, one of the 4 flat face goes forward.
Where there's an entrance, there was supposed to be an entrance to one of them, wasn't there?
Oh, I see. And that points to true north.
True north.
Okay. All right. Well, okay. I was a bit confused because I didn't. But so why did you mention? Did you say something about stars?
Yeah.
Well, what's the star got to do with true north then?
Well, that's how they knew about the stars and worked out the position of the stars and knew that the north was where it was on our planet. Because how else would they know?
I tell you what, I know a lot of things because I think I've proved, he said, sniffing, over our podcast. But you see, when it comes to things like true north and stars and all that, I don't know anything. That's why I'm asking you. I genuinely don't know. I can't even give you a definition of true north.
Okay.
I don't know, what makes it north? Is it, I don't understand why is there a true north? Magnetic north, I understand. I don't understand the true north, and I don't even know what it means, and I don't know how we work it out.
I don't know the exact theory of how it's worked out, but it shows at the true north of the planet. But clearly, the Egyptians were equipped with that knowledge in order to construct this thing to point directly there, significant-wise, because there is examples of the other pyramids which are scattered around the world, because there are others, are all in alignment with this.
With what?
With the pyramids of Giza.
Alignment with it? In what sense?
Well, they're on a similar line around the planet.
What does that mean, Tony?
Well, if you were to look at it from space, you would see that they form a line all the way around as a circle that goes around the circumference of the Earth. Not that you've got one in North America, South America, then one in North Asia. That would be a zigzag, wouldn't it? But where they're actually in a line with each other, and they circumvent the world at strategic locations.
That sounds like nonsense. I'll tell you why. Because there are pyramids in Sudan.
Okay.
And the pyramids. So if you try to draw a line from Giza, or Egypt to Sudan, you'd be going sort of southwest.
Yeah.
And if you project that in your mind, in your mind's eye, and you project, let's go northwards, right? So if you're going northeast at this stage. So northeast from Egypt will take you into Russia. Saudi Arabia, and then Russia.
Yep.
And you're going to miss China altogether.
Yep.
So aren't there pyramids in China?
I don't know that. I know that there's some in South America, and that's what they were referring to. And apparently there's a link to the one in the not the hieroglyphs, what they're called, the monuments, those big statues on Easter Island. Apparently there's some
called statues, dude.
Yeah. They're huge things over there as well.
The heads.
Yeah, they look like heads, big heads on Easter Island. And
that's kind of weird as well.
That's weird. Yeah, absolutely that's weird, because those rocks aren't native to the island. And they're huge as well. I mean, let me tell you something that I discovered, which was as fascinating as the pyramids themselves. Because obviously the pyramids, we don't know how they're built. But inside the Great Pyramid, there's the Grand Gallery. And there's massive rocks that you mentioned, the ones at the base of the pyramid. There's some in there, and that's higher up in the King's Chamber. And how were they first cut? How were they got in there and raised and put above the King's Chamber that was in there? So there's a lot of logistical questions on how these things were moved around, because there's just the feasibility of it does not make sense. I mean, unless we're missing something, or there's a simpler statement here that the early Egyptians were actually far more technologically advanced than the subsequent ones. Because
that's easy. That's easy to believe, because I don't know if you understand this. I think I've mentioned it, that from a point of view of someone like me who doesn't believe in evolution, there's an interesting fact, and that is every generation we introduce more and more mutations into our gene pool, so that we are. Let's pretend that there was an Adam and Eve, right?
Yeah.
From a certain point of view, Adam and Eve, I'm going to go with the biblical Adam and Eve, not the, whatever, biological, whatever. But let's take the biblical Adam and Eve. From a certain point of view, they were perfect specimens of humans, because they were the original copy. Every subsequent generation has degraded And we're talking about the introduction of I believe it's something like, and I think everybody can Google this. Well, sorry, can use a search engine of their choice to find out, right? But it's about 6,000 mutations per generation. And think of how many generations we've had. Okay. So it is entirely believable that 5,000 years ago, which is when these pyramids were supposedly built, there was just better humans around than we have today. Now, whether that gave them this fantastic technology, in fact, I don't even know. I'm waiting for you to make your point, because I'm sort of interrupting you here, because I've got some counter things I want to bring up.
Well,
but it's not necessarily impossible that they had ways and means of cutting stones which are not fantastical. It's just that we've forgotten how they did it.
Indeed, it is quite a possibility, but there's no evidence of that. That's the problem. We found evidence of all the different civilizations throughout the generations, and Egyptian civilization is no different. We've found many tools and artifacts that they used for making their ornaments and things. And the later generations were what you would expect, with chisels and things. The tooling that we discovered matched some of the workmanship, which actually was less efficient, less symmetrical than the previous stuff. And that either makes you wonder, have we still not found the tools, or did that original civilization die out? Or where's their equipment? There's no evidence of the equipment, of the construction. And that's the baffling thing, because even though we have the evidence of the pyramids, and there's another one, I don't know if our listeners have heard of this before, or whether you have. Have you heard of the boxes of Serapeum?
No.
Okay. Now, these are located in Saqqara in Egypt, which isn't that far away from where the Giza pyramids are.
Yeah.
And they found these 25 boxes between 70 and 100 tons each.
Are you talking about the stone boxes?
They're stone, yeah.
Oh, yeah, okay, the stone boxes, yeah.
Yeah, there are 25 of them, between 70 to 100 tons each, made of granite, but so the lines of the built, these are solid pieces of granite that have been carved out to make these boxes. These boxes are huge, by the way. Like I said, they're 70 tons each, and the lid is 30 tons. And where they found them in the chamber, they thought, they must have been made outside and brought in. The chamber has only got 2 feet of space, clearance space, around these huge boxes. So how could they have got in the chamber?
Well, they built the thing around them.
It's a chamber.
Well, they built the pyramid. Oh, sorry, the chamber. They built the chamber around the stones.
The boxes.
Around the boxes.
Okay.
These are very. By the way, these boxes. Another thing is that the lines of them are so clean.
Yeah, perfect.
I mean, it's perfect. I think audience are going to have to actually sort of try to look at these things, because you don't understand the awe with which Tony and I are speaking, because these things are awe-inspiring. They are awesome. They are awesome.
Yeah.
Huge blocks, and the perfection. That I'm still saying that we might have some difficulty, achieving today.
Yeah.
I'm sure we could with lasers and things, but I don't even know if we even could. I assume we could.
With granite, though, this is the thing. Granite crumbles and cuts and splits if you're using too strong an instrument.
What about the curved edges? How do you curve granite?
Well, I don't know. This is the thing. It's beyond compare, and even and there's a particular area, funnily enough, where you've got the boxes very close to another set of boxes that were made. You could see that they were made using, very clearly, they were made using the tools that have been unearthed, the simple tools. And the comparison is like comparing, I don't know what you want to compare it to.
A horse cart made of wood with a very flashy sports car today.
Yeah, something like that in the comparison. It's just beyond compare. One is made like it's your Apple product, and the other one is some cheap end market knockoff. That's just not compared. It's just been made in some backstreet office or wherever it may be. But honestly, the compare, it's just incredible. These boxes are so smooth, so made cleanly, not a blemish. It doesn't make sense. It just does not make sense that you could have one technology effectively used for one manufacturer of one, and side by side, just a few feet away, you've got the one you expected to see using the tools that were made, which is quite shoddy, and you can see the chisel marks and the little chips and the angles, which are all weird and wrong, which is what you would expect.
So, I think the thing is that we have to go back and look at our assumptions. We are assuming that the pyramids were built by the people whose tools we found at the site. And I put it to you that if you perform a thought experiment and say that the pyramids were actually built thousands of years before the people who left tools at the site were born, then we don't know who built the pyramids.
Yeah.
A lot of our confusion stems because of the assumption that the ancient Egyptians built the pyramids. I'm saying that if you free yourself from the shackles of that imagination, then there's less confusion, there's just ignorance. Because we then understand that there is a lost civilization that we're just completely not aware of.
Yeah, which would make more sense. However, there is some evidence to show that Ramesses II, I think it was Ramesses II, laid claim to the pyramid. So that would indicate that it was built in and around the time that we have already worked out.
What do you mean by laid claim?
Well, he signed it, apparently.
All right, but if you're a powerful pharaoh and there's this great hulking building and you're looking for somewhere to hang out when you die, you can sign it and say it's mine. Who's going to argue?
Very true, very true.
Yeah. Who's going to argue?
So he's inherited it, in other words.
Yes, and I think you'll agree that if you're doing your research, there are no hieroglyphs anywhere in Egypt showing how the pyramids were built. Right, to me, that's just the end of the conversation right there. They've got hieroglyphs of everything else. This one thing, the great big huge pyramids they built, and must have spent if it was them, which I don't think it was, they spent decades erecting, not one single hieroglyph of how they did it. To me, that proves that they didn't do it.
Well, that to me, I would have to agree. But then the question does bring us to who actually built them then.
Ooh.
Yeah. You see, we've gone through a lot of this. I mean, another bit of information which I discovered. Have you heard of the material obsidian?
Yes.
Yeah, obsidian.
What is it now? Which one is it now? Is it Star Trek or Star Wars? I think it's Star Trek.
Okay.
The obsidian order.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the hardest stone.
Yes, it is. It's on a scale of 1 to 10. It's a 9. It's just behind diamond.
Sorry, Tony.
Yeah.
Sorry. Not only that, obsidian also featured very heavily in the Game of Thrones.
Oh, did it? Oh, I don't know.
Yeah.
Wasn't I never watched the Game of Thrones.
You haven't watched the Game of Thrones, no?
No, I haven't watched the Game of Thrones. Jules has watched it.
You can't run around saying things like, I haven't watched the Game of Thrones. You just can't. You know, there are people right now who are listening to this who are choking down whatever they were drinking. You have to give fair warning before you spring stuff like this on our poor, unsuspecting audience. You know, I just hope you haven't killed anyone, man.
With that statement alone.
Sorry?
With that statement alone.
Yes. Yeah, sorry. If, you know, whatever you've spilt on yourself or whatever. But next time we will exercise more caution. You just throw it, I haven't watched the Game of Thrones. You next thing say, I haven't watched The Sound of Music or something. No, you can't run around and say stuff like that. Crikey. Anyway, you were saying.
Yeah. What I was saying, there's examples. I mean, underneath the pyramid, one of them, they found these jars and ornaments that were made.
Oh, okay? Yes.
They found 40,000 of them. Okay? These are made with really high precision. I'm not joking, from obsidian and other like materials. Now, these things, you've got to understand, they're so difficult to work on because they're so tough. And there's no way that bronze tools could really lay anything on obsidian. It's just too tough. And also, if you even got a diamond and you try to cut obsidian with a diamond, if you don't do it correctly, the obsidian will crack and shatter if it's used at the wrong angle. Now, some of these vases that were found are made so precision, so well, so beautiful even, that they are designed to be really thin. So they actually cut the obsidian. So you can imagine a little pot that sits in the palm of your hand, but the entrance at the top is very, very narrow. But it's been hollowed out of obsidian inside to make it smooth and to make it thin. The actual edges are so thin, it almost resembles glass.
Goodness.
And these artifacts were found, these jars that were found there was thousands of them in and around the first pyramid. Now, those by themselves people would question, how on earth could you do that? We can't do that today.
Wow.
So how were they able to do it? So this really raises the question, and you've alluded to it, was there a civilization that predates the Egyptians that built all this stuff, but somehow faded away, was destroyed? I know there's myths about what's it called, Atlantis and things like that. Yes. Did they genuinely exist? Was there this technologically advanced civilization, and did they exist on the planet but somehow got destroyed and died away? We don't know. So the flip side to that, if we can't find any evidence of an advanced civilization, despite the fact what we've talked about here seems to imply a really high level of intelligence. So if we can't find evidence of an intelligent civilization on the planet Earth, this is where we get fanciful with some of these theories about, well, okay, then could it be aliens?
Yeah, well, before we go full nuts, okay? I would like to think that you see, there are all sorts of problems with this, Tony. I would like to think that there aren't any aliens involved, and it's crazy to talk about aliens. But as you know, I have recently begun ever so slightly to change my mind, to flip-flop on this, and to begin to accept the possibility that we are not alone. Because I spoke to you private. Well, I sent you a private message.
Yeah, you did.
I said because of certain things, which we can talk about in the future podcast, that I'm beginning to think, well, this really needs some kind of explanation. We can't just sweep it away. And
Well, if you don't mind me asking, what was one of the, just for our sake of our listeners, because there must be something there that you must have thought, whoa, and that's actually changed your point of view slightly. So is there any one that you can bring to the front and explain to our listeners now?
Well, it was the head of the Russian Space Agency saying there's something out there, because every time there are military innovations, these objects show up and seem to be observing. And he said, it's not just us. It's the Americans, it's the Chinese, it's humanity that's being observed. And it's got to do with our military. It's like when, nothing happens and then we design a new kind of missile or we design a new kind of aircraft or something. And when it's going through its paces, there's an increase in UFO activity. And then after a while, that dies down. It's as if they've come and studied us and then gone. And it's like, who's doing that? It's not us. And this has been going on for decades.
And it's not drones or our enemy.
No, it's been going on for decades before we spoke about drones or anything. Like, remember the original Foo Fighters? That phrase, Foo Fighters, that first emerged in the Second World War.
Yeah.
So this has been going on for decades. And this guy who was talking about this Russian head of Russian space agency was talking about this is something that like military types of high up military types know about. And then of course there's the Tic Tac video. So I went back and looked at that again. And this time, because previously I've been looking at it as definitely like a human vehicle.
Yeah.
This time, because my mind was more open, I looked at it again and I took note of the way it was zipping around. And you think, well, that's not really how we design. I mean, what method of propulsion, for one thing, was it actually using? It wasn't burning hydrocarbon fuels, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So there are questions. I'm not full gonzo on this yet. Okay. But all I'm saying is that I used to just say a flat out no before. I used to be totally skeptical. But I'm not. I am no longer totally skeptical. I would no longer be shocked to find out that there are aliens.
Okay. So going back to our topic today about who built the aliens and using my sort aliens? Of no, sorry, who built the pyramids? Sorry, and my logic in terms of there's certainly some intelligence that's clearly more advanced that's built I believe the pyramids and all these artifacts that were discovered, which are so beautifully made, and so the precision and the delicacy of some of these things. I mean, there was one shown as an example, one of these artifacts. It resembled an egg made of obsidian, an egg. And the design allowed it to be balanced on the tiniest bit at the bottom. And it's in a museum today. And it looks like an egg shape, all cut out from obsidian, and it balances on the tiniest part of its outer casing on the spot, and it's steady. I mean, that's incredible craftsmanship. Even by our standards today, we pale into insignificance to that. And this was found, well, obviously at the base of the first pyramid, and it's supposed to be thousands of years old. So
yeah, the thing is, you see, when I want to poo-poo this alien thing, the only reason is because we haven't found any evidence of this earlier civilization.
Yeah.
Now, if they built the pyramids and the pyramids survived and the Sphinx survived, then you have to dismiss the notion of a catastrophe that affected the landscape, because otherwise the pyramids themselves would have been destroyed.
Yes, of course.
And if it was not a catastrophe, some kind of global. Even if it was a global catastrophe, we found fossils of the dinosaurs. Why haven't we found advanced craft and things? We found the obsidian
artifaction jars and all these
art
things.
jars and whatnot.
Yeah.
Well, so if they had space-going vehicle, well, okay, if they had aircraft and ships, and surely we would have stumbled upon something. How come it's just this? This is my main beef. How come it's just this and nothing else? That's my problem with being an earlier civilization. There's no trace, no other trace of them. So our assumptions, again, we need to look at our assumptions. Maybe it was aliens because they came, they built this thing, and they naffed off. Maybe that is the final solution. But why were they building obsidian vessels which they left behind? And in fact, what was the point of the pyramids even?
Yeah.
None of it, So, it's one of these mysteries where you just go, you start throwing your hands up and saying, I don't know. Genuinely don't know.
Something which is really also very interesting is there's this little, as part of this, I'm fascinated by all these jars and artifacts they found. 40,000 of them they unearthed.
40,000?
I know, 40,000. And one in particular, which I saw a photo of, it seems to stand out for me because if you remember, this is pre-Bronze Age, okay? But a few of the artifacts have got gold on them, but in intricate design. So they must have, whoever crafted these must have known about not welding, but melting metal in order to form shapes that covered some of the stones. And so, one in particular looked, if I can try and describe it for our audience, it looked like a whistle, but a long whistle made of stone, but the end, the bit that you blow into, was gold. And it had a hole designed in it, a bit where there was a tiny little hole that looked like it was a whistle that you blow into, but that was gold. So it was melted and formed around that to create that shape on the stone. And it looks out of place when you put it against the other artifacts that were found away from the pyramid and away from the obsidian vases and all those intricate stoneware, but brought with the other Egyptian artifacts that they've discovered over the years. It really does look like a fish out of water. It doesn't fit. They don't fit. They're far in advance of all the other stuff that came after. That it does seem to indicate either an intelligence, as you said, but where does that intelligence come from? Why have we not found any evidence of it on the planet Earth? Or is it just still buried and we just haven't found it? It could be, but as you rightly say, why have the pyramids still here? Okay, they're built well. Give them that. So they can probably withstand quite a lot of turmoil on the planet.
Yeah, well, palaces, for instance. So they built these wonderful pyramids. Did they not build, fantastic palaces for themselves? Whoever these people were. Well, okay, so another question is this. Another thing is this. These pyramids are smack in the middle of what is now the desert, but in those days would not have been. Actually, they've been very lush, almost marshy land.
Okay.
And those stones did not come from anywhere near where the pyramids stand.
No, they didn't. They're quarried in Aswan, which is 1,000 kilometers away.
How the heck did they drag these humongous stones, like you said, 1,000 miles away, over 1,000 miles, over rough terrain? No, it's not exactly they had the M1 or anything, a motorway or highway to drag them down. So how did they do it? And the common answer is a rather foolish answer. They said, they put them on barges. But the largest barge we've ever found the Egyptians using wouldn't have been able to take even one of the smaller stones.
No.
Never mind one of the larger ones. So the answer is we don't know.
See, that's frustrating, isn't it?
Very. Very, because and it's not just that we don't know. Because we don't know could be, well, it could be A, B, or C, but we don't know which. That's not it. No, it's we don't have an A. We don't have a B. We don't have a C. We actually don't know. We don't know how the stones got from
There are some theories, of course there are.
No, but I'm talking about workable theories. Just saying that they put them on a barge with no evidence, that's not a theory. That's not actually a scientific thing to say because it's not reasonable. No. There's no evidence for it. If you have evidence for something, that's fine. But just, it must have been a barge. Why? Because you can't think of something else? Maybe it wasn't a barge. This is what I'm trying to say, that there's a level of speculation where that's no longer academically viable. Sound, thank you. Yeah. It's not academically sound because you just pulled that out, sorry to use the expression, you just pulled that out of your bottom. It doesn't mean anything. It's nonsensical, you just, it must have been. Why must it have been? Okay, show us. There was this chap who was saying they could have used a bronze saw. There's a video of Egyptologists saying, it must have been a bronze saw that was used to cut these stones. And I'll demonstrate it. So, the skeptic showed up with a camera and then he said, okay, he got these two Egyptian lads and he said, well, there you go. So this long saw, bronze saw. And so what we do is we put sand and it's the sand that actually does the cutting, not the saw.
Right.
And so the boys started going back and forth. You know how when men are standing at either end of a saw, they're pulling back and forth?
Yeah.
And they were doing this, and then one of the skeptics said, so how long do you reckon this is going to take? I said, we've been practicing, and it's okay. It took us, in practice, 4 hours to go down 1 millimeter. And then the skeptic was like, well, that's a waste of time. Just kind of left.
Well, I'm not surprised.
Because how many stones did you say? 2.3 million?
2.3 million stones, yeah.
Yeah. So, at 1 millimeter every 4 hours.
4 hours.
And then, so the following day, whatever it was, I don't know, they came back and it was maybe about an inch deep. I said, we were able to accelerate it by adding water. So that's one day. We went down 4 inches or something. And it had no resemblance to the fine cut that we're talking about.
Wow.
No resemblance at all. So you have these people who they call themselves academics, but they can't be objective. They have to go with the personal biases and prejudices and assumptions and beliefs.
Yeah.
Because anyone looking at that just would say, no, that's not how it was done now. It's just blindingly obvious.
Yeah. I mean, there's certain theories about certain bits of the process. Mm-hmm. So, for instance, there's one about how did they get the rocks or the stones if they were on a barge, but you've already debunked that anyway. But even if they had a vessel big enough to bring it on the Nile is still 6.2 miles away from the Giza site. So how did they transport? Do you see what I mean? It's like
the ticklish problem of getting a 25-ton
rock
granite stone, off a barge. That's a ticklish problem.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is this: are you trying to say that in moving 2.3 million stones, there was never, ever an accident or anything on the map?
Of course.
So why don't we see the accidents.
Yeah, the stones that have fallen into the Nile.
Yeah. Where are those then?
Yeah, it's nonsense. We have no idea, do we? These are all theories at best they are, and they sound plausible to a point, but then when you investigate further, you can just find so many holes in them. I mean, and also someone then added to that story and said, oh yeah, what they did, they built this like a reservoir, a water shaft from the Nile that went all the way to the pyramid. So they floated the rocks on the water to the pyramid. Now, imagine what we just said. This water channel would have been 6.2 miles long for a start. It would have had to be constructed and then filled with water so that these stones didn't just sink. There was enough water in there to keep them buoyed. Otherwise, they just sink. Think about that. So how would you then elevate these rocks in this channel to move those rocks all the way along and pulled by humans or oxen? Obviously, if these rocks, these big slabs, could float somehow, then you could sort of believe it. But they're 2.5 ton, the smaller ones, by themselves. They're not going to just float. They're going to sink.
Yeah, rocks tend not to float out.
So, you have to then start to work out how the hell could they, create something, a boat or something, to lift these rocks up in this channel. So the channel would have to be as deep as the Nile to support that sort of weight. So if that was the case, where's the evidence for this?
Where is the channel?
Yeah.
Where's the channel?
Why they break it down if that was the answer? And then once you've got the stones there, how do you lift them up to the top end of the actual pyramid?
Well, I assume the same way you actually lifted them from where you got them in Aswan onto the barges in the first place. So you've already cracked it once. I assume you would have cracked it again and take them off. But it's just...
Well, how'd you go up with water? Do you see what I mean? How'd you then drag them up to the top of the pyramid as you're building it up? You've still got to bring the stones from the bottom up. How?
Oh, that. Oh,
yeah.
That. Well, you see, I don't know. I mean, I genuinely don't know. That's one of those things I don't know about.
Because they didn't have the wheel, did they?
Wasn't there some huge... Well, I'm going to come back to that in a second. But wasn't there another mystery being the actual cap of the pyramid? It's a single stone, isn't it? I mean, it's missing now. Or it fell or something, correct?
Well, no, it's still there. The cap is still there, but it's what's come off is the bits on the sides. Because if you think about this pyramid was sleek all the way down.
Yes. Yeah. So that cap, right? Isn't there something about how heavy that was?
The cap itself is huge, yes.
Oh, exactly. So that's the other thing. It's like, okay, how the hell did you take the cap up there? You understand? It's like, it's a mystery, pal. It's an enduring... I don't know how it was done. It'd be wonderful to find out one day, if someone just can figure it out. Because, I mean, I don't even think anyone, like multi-billionaires. I mean, who's the richest man in the world? Elon Musk.
Elon Musk.
He, rather than buy Twitter, I would have asked him to try to build a pyramid.
You reckon?
Yeah, I thought that.
He thinks they're made by aliens. He says that.
Wow. Oh, okay.
So he doesn't believe that they were made by ancient Egyptians at all.
But you see, why are there barracks then?
The barracks? What, for people working, you mean?
Yeah, if it wasn't built by the ancient Egyptians, why are there barracks near the pyramids?
Well, there must have been people working on them, but how do they do it? Did they get help?
It was them, from what you've just said now.
Well, Well, I don't know. I know the barracks were there, but so there must have been some work going ahead. But to construct the pyramids from scratch, I'm still flummoxed. It doesn't mean they weren't built by them. It's just that we haven't discovered how they've done it.
Let me ask you a question.
Okay.
Supposing, not aliens, but supposing there was a priestly order who knew how to cut these stones.
Okay.
Okay? And supposing this priestly order kept their knowledge totally secret. Okay. And then supposing a pharaoh came along who quarreled with them and killed them all without thinking things through. I mean, we know leaders don't always think things through because we're living in a moment when Western leaders haven't thought through what they're doing with Russia. So we have a living examples of leaders not always thinking things through. So if that was the case, if there was this priestly order who knew how to cut these stones, who had some kind of technology that they kept very, very secret, and then who was it? Amenhotep? Who was it? Pharaoh Amenhotep, right? Mm-hmm. No, sorry, I beg your pardon. Akhenaten. Pharaoh Akhenaten, who came along, and he was the first pharaoh who said, no, forget about all these multiple gods. There's only one God, the sun God. He was the first monotheist, remember? Mm-hmm. And he created a lot of hassle in his kingdom because he was trying to force monotheism on his population, and they weren't happy. So, I mean, Egyptologists will probably be rolling their eyes and thinking this Tyre doesn't know anything because he's got his order of events all wrong. But what I'm trying to say is, imagine if there is a religious problem and then the priestly order is killed and the secret disappears with them. That would account for virtually everything. Well, no, it doesn't account for anything, actually, because we still don't know how they did it. But at least it keeps it human, and at least it keeps it Egyptian. We just don't then just end up saying whatever the secret they took with them. It was multiple secrets. It was the secret of lifting heavy weights and the secret of cutting stones. So there were multiple secrets because it's not just a question of cutting those stones so finely. There's also the question of how do you lift the blooming things? How do you transport them?
But do you feel that would be a knowledge that they would have acquired, or would it been given to them? As you say, could it have been acquired via visions or something? So that's what you're saying.
No,
so you're making it worldly, so that they're humans that know how to do it. But then, in order to use that information, they would have used tools, would they not?
Yeah.
And that's the missing piece.
Yeah, I agree. Look, my theory is full of holes, pal. Okay? It's full of holes. I'm just trying desperately to avoid going aliens, that's all. That's what I'm trying to do here. I'm trying to stay away from the alien thing. And I'm bending over backwards and probably making a fool of myself at the same time. But yeah, there's a problem. But then again, the barracks. So I do have a tiny little bit of evidence on my side, which is that an awful lot of people were once housed near the pyramids, and they seem to be workers.
When you say an awful lot, what do you mean? Are we talking thousands? Because there were some numbers with some of the weights that they were talking about. Remember I mentioned earlier in the show about the Serapeum boxes, which were roughly 70, which were 70 to 100 tons each. They worked out that it would take 2,000 men to move the box and the lid from that area. So 2,000 men's weight and strength would be enough to lift a 100-ton weight. Now, granted, how can you get 2,000 men in that little tomb? I have no idea. There's no space, but that's a separate question again. So if we're talking weights of stone for moving these stones, granted, they're not all 100 tons. Like I said, some were 2.5 tons, the smaller blocks, and some were 20 tons. But that's still a sizable number of men that would be needed just to move one block. And remember, they had no wheels, So
yeah, why do you say that though? What about chariots?
no, they didn't have chariots.
Well, I've seen chariots. I've seen Egyptians on chariots fighting.
No, apparently the wheel wasn't even invented. That came later.
Okay.
So the only thing that they had was logs that they could have put underneath things.
Yeah,
So,
logs on 100-ton
well,
stone. That's not going to fare very well, is it? And it's not going to do
no.
anything, basically.
Well, you'd have to put several logs all underneath the chariot of construction or whatever you made.
Then the
Put
logs
the
will interfere with one another, and you get friction, and I don't think you're able to pull anything.
wow. But they're saying as well that they were pulled along the ground and it's sand. So they wet the sand in order to drag it easier along the sand. But if you're wetting the sand to pull this heavy weight, how do you get grip if you've wet the sand? Your feet are going to sink in it, surely. So the people pulling. So do you see what I mean? I'm already finding holes in the narrative of moving the rocks by just sheer brute force, and you'd need, like I said, hundreds of men, if anything, not thousands with some of the rocks. But you've got 2.5 million rocks. You've then got to, mine them from wherever it was as one, get them transported a thousand. Yeah, exactly.
Because the bronze couldn't do it. Bronze tools couldn't mine the blocks.
Wow. I'm mindful we're getting to the end of the show here, by the way, so I'm looking at you very shortly to sum up here. But yeah, go on, carry on.
You didn't have pneumatic drills. You didn't have pneumatic drills. Like I said, the problem of movement and placement is just one insurmountable problem in itself. And then the other problem is the problem of artistry, of craftsmanship, which we can't match today. No. So there are your two problems right there. And that means, to sum it up for you, that means we don't know who built the pyramids. No. It's very unlikely that it was the ancient Egyptians. Very unlikely.
I'm with you there. We don't know, and that's all we can say. I'm not going to put my hat on aliens. I'm not going to put my hat on any one other thing, although it does strengthen the argument for that. But we have to sort of go with we don't know. We just don't know because of all the different theories out there. None of them hold up under scrutiny. So I'm with you on that one.
It's infuriating.
It is. But I'd love to hear the feedback from our listeners if they've got any views on this. But yeah, with that, unfortunately, we have reached the end of the show for another week.